must apologize for the video quality. This is the first time I've ever actually recorded videos using my phone and tried to make any kind of presentation this way. Today's subject is law enforcement and the legal system. Now, one thing that a lot of people feel is that justice seems to slip through our fingers quite a bit. There's a feeling among a lot of communities that the police can't be trusted. There's a lot of ambiguity about how prisoners are treated and how criminals are treated, and there's this perception that the more money you have, the less time you're going to spend in jail. And these are all good, valid subjects and valid topics. I've looked at the perspective of law enforcement and the legal system, and I've examined it and then contemplated it and looking at it where I've narrowed my focus, as I did talk about in my first video. I tried to define the parameters and boundaries and tried to look at things, with the perspective of American history, and in addition to that, what is pragmatic and what will work and get us moving forward. As I said before, I'm a troubleshooter, and I spend a lot of my time troubleshooting, and when you're troubleshooting an issue, in engineering at least, you usually don't go play the blame game. What you do is you focus on solving the problem, and then after the problem's resolved, you can go back, examine the data, examine the facts, and try to find a root cause of the problem. A lot of the problems we have in our legal system, we already kind of know the root cause, but that's not the point of this video. One thing to consider, and which most people don't ever consider, is do we have a right as a society to ask a group of people, call them law enforcement, and say to them, well, we want you to protect us, we want you to keep us safe, but at the same time, you're going to have a 75% divorce rate, you're going to suffer from post-traumatic stress and depression at a 5x greater than the average population. You're going to have a higher incidence of alcoholism and drug use just because you're a law enforcement, in law enforcement. And the fact is, I don't believe that we have the right as a society to ask individuals to carry this burden themselves. That's a burden, and this is law enforcement is a burden that needs to be shared by everyone. So that's one thing to consider when we look at law enforcement. What can we do to alleviate that? Another aspect is how do we deal with the criminals? So I've made a few notes. The most important thing with our legal system is that we need to ensure equal application and enforcement of the law. This is especially true when it comes to incarceration. When you go across the United States, you have a variety of ways that the criminals and the prisoners are kept and housed, and this varies greatly depending upon what state you're in. This is not an equal application of the law. When I say equal application, that means that no matter what color you are, and no matter what religious belief, no matter what, the law applies to you the same way as it does to me or to anyone else. We need to figure out how to get that back working again. We've allowed money to play too big an influence on the legal outcomes in courts. We need to figure a way. Do I have the answer to this? I do and I don't. This is something that needs input. You'll never hear me say that I've got the answers to every single thing. But what I do know is that I'm able to identify the problems, and that's a start. Problem definition is the first step in identifying and solving a problem. You have to be able to identify it. So we need to focus on the equal application and enforcement of the law. We need to make sure that everybody everywhere in the United States, all the citizens are treated, and everybody that's arrested in the United States is treated the same, given the same human rights, the same respect, the same treatment, the same conditions. We need to find a way to expedite cases. We need to do this by establishing additional levels of courts. Right now, if you ask any judiciary anywhere in the United States, they'll say, "Yeah, we have a backlog of cases going back months, years. Years. We have thousands of cases waiting to be tried." Well, the reality is we need to catch that up, and we need to. And this would give us an opportunity. To try something new. And what would that be? Well, for one thing, if you commit a crime in a large city, you're going to go downtown to the county courthouse and you're going to be tried there. The people in the neighborhood where you might have committed your crime are likely not going to be on your jury. You're not going to be. They're going to see some sentence, or they'll hear about it, but mostly they'll feel that justice hasn't been served. We need to establish neighborhood courts, and we need to figure out a way how to do this. Well, we bring courts. Now the fact is, we don't need a big building to hold a trial or to hold courts. We don't need that. We're caught up in these big structures, and these structures cost a lot of money, but they don't actually serve justice or dispense justice. It's just a clearinghouse, and these clearinghouses are broken. What we need to do is we need to establish a lot of smaller courts that handle, much like little city courts, to handle misdemeanors and minor felonies in neighborhoods. And that way we get, this will serve two purposes. It allows the people in areas in a neighborhood to participate in the judicial system. And that's important. We need people to participate in our society. And we do not have that participation right now, and it's really biting us in the butt. We don't engage people. We have low voting most of the time, and we don't have this participation, and we need this participation. We need to develop a long-term plan for most felons, as the recidivism rate is very high, and over 50% of the criminals will end up back in prison within a few years. So we've got to think about the criminals in a long-term sense. How do we get them to go along with society and not be criminals? Well, there's probably no way to keep every criminal from being a criminal. But there are different solutions to this that provide a carrot, so to speak. The carrot and the stick. Well, we can. There's some ideas, but I'm going to cover this particular aspect in another video. I've actually got some very good ideas worked out on this, and it's part of a bigger plan. We need to find ways to take the business out of the legal system. Again, this points back to equal application of law. We need to have the law equally applied, and quite frankly, there's a lot of lawyers that will petition the court and tie up the legal system, knowing that the prosecutor's office is probably overworked. And anyway, we need to figure out how to get the business out of law enforcement. What is the business? Well, there's a lot of aspects to that. There's the lawyers, there's the judges, there's the prison guards, there's the law enforcement personnel themselves. You've got jails. It's quite an industry, and we need to start figuring a way to minimize this. I've heard many people say, well, they get rousted. I met people that actually had gotten rousted for crimes they didn't commit. And these were misdemeanor type of crimes. And I was talking to them, and I said, well, you were convicted of this? And they said, well, yeah, I pled guilty. And I said, well, why did you do that? Well, the fact of the matter was, if they had pled, they were poor, and if they had pled not guilty when they went to their hearing, then they wouldn't be able to afford their bail, and they would sit in jail for 3 or 4 weeks, 5 weeks, until their hearing came up. And then at that time, they'd be able to plead their case, and in which case they'd probably get it kicked out, and they'd find, well, there wasn't sufficient evidence, or it wasn't a well-made case anyway. Rather than do that, a lot of people, these people that I talked to, they said, well, if I had had the money, I would have bailed myself out, then I would have fought it and pled not guilty. So we can't let money, we're letting money create criminals in this country. And how do I mean that? Well, this poor person, if a poor person is arrested for something they didn't do, just some general roundup of people, then if they're able to get out on bail, or if they had an expedient trial, then this wouldn't have occurred. Now, you can't necessarily give people lower bails, because the guilty people that are criminals will take advantage of that. So again, this goes back to expediting the judicial process. If you get arrested for some petty misdemeanor, or a small misdemeanor, or a misdemeanor, you should be able to go to court, and there should be a trial within just a few weeks. Now, if you can afford a lawyer, within a week, within the next day. We need to expedite this to get the money out of this. Now, I know a lot of lawyers will say, wait a minute, you're not going to serve the purpose of justice. Well, quite frankly, with a little disrespect to lawyers intended, quite frankly, I've never talked to a lawyer where they didn't have the meter running. And I've never talked to a lawyer yet that didn't feel that they wanted to make a lot of money. They also wanted to serve justice. And a lot of lawyers do want to serve justice, but there are a lot of corrupt individuals out there that really don't care about serving justice. They're more about making as much money as they possibly can. They get jaded just like everybody else. Now, the most important, one of the biggest points I'd like to make about the legal system in the United States is that what we need to do is citizens must participate in the actual patrolling of the streets, in the policing activities, the activities of policing, being the police. What we need to do is we need to organize ourselves. Now, this is very similar to what we did in colonial America. The responsibility and the safety of all the people in the village was the responsibility, a shared responsibility by everyone. So when there were times of crimes and violence, insurrections, people would organize themselves and they would patrol the streets, and they would each take their turn standing guard at night. And this served us very, very well. Eventually, the cities got big enough that people said, well, we don't need this, we'd rather hire people to do that. And then after a period of time, we got so big and so complex a society that it began to burn out the police and affect, their ability to be stable, have marriages that last, and the stress of seeing people lie, cheat, and steal, and murder all the time. It's got to take a mental toll that like I said earlier at the very beginning, it's not right that we expect people as a society to do this for a job. I was talking to my cousin about this idea, and she's an elderly woman, a doctor in the Portland area, and she said, well, James, I don't think I'd feel very safe patrolling the streets. I said, well, yeah, but if we all had to patrol the streets and we go in groups, if you were my neighbor and you expressed to me that you would have fear, I would say to you, well, Virginia, gosh, I'd make sure you were safe. And I would, you'd be protected by the group. And so this would do a number of things. One, it would let us get to know our neighbors better. And we'd learn that we're all in this together. And that's something that the coronavirus should be teaching us right now, is that we're all in this together. So what we need to do is really we need to start patrolling our own neighborhoods, calling the police and having them help us only when we have made an arrest or when we need their help. This way we would say, oh, okay, well, we don't have the police patrolling the neighborhoods. We have the citizens patrolling the neighborhoods, and if there were issues with the gangs and things like that, then of course we could contact the police and say, listen, we've got a gang problem here. We could bring in the federal marshals, the U.S. marshals, and start dealing with these other things. But in the meantime, we would be able to get people involved in their own protection, and it would take away the onus of some group of people called police having to be the bad guys all the time, when in fact they're the good guys. But they're given a tough task that's impossible for any human to do successfully all the time. So we've got to change that expectation, and we need to get off our couches, and we need to participate in our society. And this is one way that something very simple. It would save us a lot of money, and it would just probably require some training. People would have to be trained. Well, this is how you approach somebody. If there's a crime in process, don't stop the criminal, but contact the police. But in the meantime, we'd be able to instill in people a sense that they've got some control over their protection. When the children at night and during the day, hey, where's dad going? Where's mom going? Oh, she's going to go patrol the streets. It's her turn. It's our family's turn to participate in this. We'll be able to say, the children say, oh gosh, this is a good thing. I'm proud of my parents for having the inner strength to go and patrol and to take on this duty, because it is a duty and a responsibility. We are responsible for our own safety, ultimately, and we cannot delegate that to people who are paid money to be lawyers or doctors, lawyers and policemen. We can't put it 100% on them, because crime does occur, and we need to get this under control.